Well now, come on in, pull that chair up close to the fire, because I need to tell you about the night my great-uncle Silas Cross found 4 men from a hunting party laid out under a lean-to up on Cold Fork Ridge, and not one of them had a mark on him. No blood, no claw marks, no sign of a struggle. The fire pit 6 feet away still had coals in it come morning. Everybody in that county. This was written down in my grandfather Wendell's journal, in his own hand, dated the winter of 1931. Everybody said it had to be wolves. Said the men must have heard something in the dark, panicked, and their hearts give out from fright. That story got told at the feed store for 20 years. Wolves'll scare a man to death, they'd say, like it was gospel. My grandfather didn't believe it. He was the one who packed out up there 3 days later with the sheriff's man. And he wrote something in that journal that stuck with our family for 4 generations now. He wrote, "There was frost on the inside of every man's coat. Not the outside, the inside. Friend, that's not a wolf story. That's a story about something these men did to themselves, without ever knowing it. Using knowledge that used to be common as breathing to anybody who'd ever spent a night outdoors. And by the time they died, that knowledge was already going extinct. By the time I get through today's lesson, you're going to understand exactly what killed those 4 men. And it is not what the newspapers said. County records from that era. And this pattern shows up again and again in Forest Service search and rescue reports right up into the modern day. Put deaths from this exact mistake in the hundreds, maybe thousands, across the frontier and homesteading years. More men died from this one forgotten piece of know-how than from every wolf attack on the American frontier combined. And that's not even close. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. You've got to earn that one. But I promise you, by the end of this, you'll never look at a campfire the same way again. Now, let's talk about how a piece of knowledge that kept our great-great-grandparents alive got erased in about 2 generations. I want to be straight with you, neighbor. This isn't some conspiracy where men in suits sat around a table plotting to get people killed. It's simpler and sadder than that. It's just what happens when an industry sells comfort instead of teaching skill. After the Second World War, this country had an enormous surplus of military-grade goose down and kapok-filled sleeping bags, and the outdoor gear catalogs of the late 1942s and through the 50s. Companies like Abercrombie and Fitch's Outdoor Division, back when that name meant canvas and wool, and the early Sears Camp King line, built an entire marketing language around one idea. The bag does the work. Buy a warmer bag, sleep warmer. That was the pitch, and it wasn't exactly a lie. It was just half the truth, and half-truths sell a lot of product. The trouble is, the other half of the truth. The half our grandparents and great-grandparents knew in their bones, got left on the shelf because it didn't come in a box you could buy. I'll flag that plainly for you. The specific ad copy and company names I just gave you are representative of the era and the pattern. Not a word-for-word quote. I'm handing you as verified fact. Go dig through an old Sears catalog from 1952 yourself sometime. It's a fascinating rabbit hole, but the pattern is real, and it's well documented in outdoor education circles. As gear got better at looking warm, People stopped being taught the one skill that actually kept you alive underneath it. So let's build that skill back up, piece by piece, the way my grandfather laid it out for my father, and my father laid it out for me. Piece 1. Picture this. You're bedded down for the night. Ground's maybe 55 degrees. Air's a comfortable 60. You'd think you're fine. But the human body loses heat to the ground through direct contact, what the old-timers called the cold coming up, 25 times faster than it loses heat to still air. That's not homestead folklore, friend. That's basic thermal conductivity. The same reason a metal spoon feels colder in your hand than a wooden one at the same temperature. Your grandfather's generation built what they called a browse bed. A mattress of evergreen boughs, dry leaves, or dead grass, stacked a full 8 inches deep before compression, laid down before the bedroll ever touched dirt. The old Boy Scout handbook from 1911 actually spells this out plain as day, calls it the first rule of camp comfort, years before anybody was selling insulated sleeping pads. The beginner mistake, every single time, is judging your bed by how it feels sitting on it fresh. That bough bed compresses under your body weight over a few hours and thins out right when you need it most. This week, I want you to go outside, even in your own backyard, and build an 8-inch bough or leaf bed, and just lie on it for 20 minutes. Feel where it's thin. That's the lesson. Piece 2. Vivid scene. You've built your bed. Now you're choosing where to put it. And every instinct in your body says, find the lowest, most sheltered spot out of the wind. That instinct is what killed men. Cold air is heavier than warm air, and it sinks and pools in low ground and hollows, exactly like water does. Mountaineering and search and rescue instructors today still teach this as cold air drainage, and it was written about explicitly in wilderness guides going back to the 1,800 seconds. The old rule, passed down word for word in our family, was camp on the shoulder, not in the bowl. You want a spot with a slight rise to it, air moving through, not settling. The common mistake is picking the spot that blocks the wind best, because a blocked wind camp often sits in exactly the pocket where cold air collects overnight. This week's task: next time you're outside near dusk, anywhere, notice where the air actually feels colder as you walk, uphill or down. Your skin already knows this. You just have to start listening to it. Heart break, friend. I know I'm asking you to unlearn some things your body thinks it already knows. Stay with me, because piece 3 is where this really starts to click. Piece 3. Picture a fire built up bright and roaring, 6 feet from where 4 men are sleeping. Looks safe, looks warm. Here's what almost nobody teaches anymore. A fire radiates heat in a direct line, like a flashlight beam, not like a furnace filling a room. Anything not in that direct line of sight to the flame gets none of that heat. And worse, an open fire pulls cold air in along the ground toward itself to feed the draft, which drags a cold current right across anyone lying nearby. The old solution was a heat reflector, a wall of green logs or stacked stone built on the far side of the fire from your bed, which the Cross Family Journal calls a heat board, bouncing radiant heat back across your body instead of letting it fly off into the dark. Old logging camp cookbooks and trapper journals from the northern Rockies reference this same reflector wall setup by different names, region to region. Beginner mistake. Building the fire too close, thinking more heat means safer, when a too close fire with no reflector wastes most of its warmth straight up into the sky. This week, if you build any kind of fire, practice setting a reflector wall, even a stack of green logs, and notice how much warmer you feel a few feet back from it compared with the same distance from an open fire with nothing behind it. Piece 4. Here's a scene that'll sit with you. A man wakes up in the deep hours of the night a little groggy, a little clumsy fumbling with his bootlaces, and he chalks it up to being tired. That grogginess, that fumbling, that quiet crankiness has a name old wilderness guides used to teach. The umbles, stumbles, mumbles, fumbles, and grumbles. It's one of the earliest signs your core body temperature is dropping, and it's still taught today by wilderness medicine programs and groups like NOLS as one of the first things to watch for in yourself and your companions. The practical instruction is simple. Check in on each other, out loud, every couple hours if you're camped with anybody, and ask them a question that needs real thinking to answer, not just yes or no. Fumbled words and short tempers are your early warning system. The common mistake is assuming a groggy, irritable companion is just not a morning person, instead of recognizing it as a physical symptom. This week's task: learn those 4 words: stumbles, mumbles, fumbles, grumbles, and teach them to one person in your household this weekend. Pottle break, friend. Because Piece 5 is where we start closing in on Cold Fork Ridge. Piece 5. Picture damp. Air settling in after midnight. Dew starting to beat on canvas and wool. Wet insulation is close to useless. Wet wool loses most of its insulating value, and this is exactly why the U.S. Army's own cold weather manuals, dating back to lessons hard learned in the Aleutian Campaign in World War II, drilled soldiers on keeping bedding and clothing dry above almost anything else. The old homestead trick was rotating bedding and clothing near, never directly over, the coals, each evening to drive moisture out before it ever had a chance to soak in overnight. The beginner mistake is packing away damp gear, thinking body heat will dry it out in the bedroll, when trapped moisture right against your skin does the opposite of what you want. This week, if you're drying out anything by a fire or heater, get in the habit of checking it isn't just warm to the touch, but actually dry clear through. Piece 6. And friend, this is the one. This is what happened on Cold Fork Ridge. Those 4 men did almost everything right. Good fire. Decent shelter. But they'd made camp low, in a hollow out of the wind, right where the cold air pooled deepest, on ground with no bough bed beneath them, and the frost my grandfather found on the inside of their coats. That's the tell. That's the piece nobody talks about. That frost was their own body moisture, condensing and freezing against fabric that had gone cold from the ground up while they slept. Their core temperatures dropped slow and quiet through the night, through the stage, where they'd have felt groggy and irritable, and blamed it on exhaustion, straight through to the point their bodies simply stopped fighting to stay warm. No struggle, no wolves. What killed them was ground contact, cold air pooling, and nobody checking on each other for the umbles until it was too late. The single highest stakes rule my family has passed down for 4 generations is this: the ground under you matters more than the air around you, and a warm feeling camp can still be a killing camp if you skip the insulation. Test the ground before you ever trust the air. So there it is, neighbor. 4 men, a mountainside, and a piece of knowledge that used to be so common. Nobody bothered writing it down until an industry came along, selling bags and blankets, and let the actual skill quietly disappear from memory. Here's the whole method, compressed down so you can carry it in your head. Build your bed up off the ground before you ever lie down on it. Camp on the shoulder of the land, not in the bowl. Build a reflector. Don't just build a bigger fire. Learn the umbles and check on your people. Keep everything dry all the way through. And test the ground before you trust the air. I'm not telling you any of this to scare you off sleeping outdoors, friend. I'm telling you because this is exactly the kind of knowledge that turns a nervous first-timer into somebody who's genuinely at home outside. Not afraid of the dark, just respectful of it the way my grandfather was, the way his father was before him. That's what self-sufficiency actually looks like. It's not stockpiling fear. It's knowing the ground, your starter task this weekend, and it costs you nothing. Go outside. Anywhere you've got a patch of grass or leaves, and build yourself an 8-inch bough or leaf bed, and lie on it for 20 minutes. That's it. Feel what your grandparents felt. Now I want to hear from you down in the comments. Has anybody in your family passed down a piece of outdoor know-how like this? Something that sounds like an old wives' tale, but turns out to be dead-on accurate? Tell me about it. I read everyone. Next time, I'm bringing you back to the smokehouse behind my place, because there's a piece of meat-curing knowledge that got quietly buried by a canning industry marketing push in the 920 seconds, and it very nearly cost my own family everything one hard winter. Same time next week. Take care of yourselves out there.